The famine continued to affect Egypt and the surrounding lands, but Joseph, now second in command under Pharaoh, was prepared. Joseph had been entrusted with Egypt's resources and had spent years overseeing the grain collection to ensure Egypt's survival. Joseph, dressed in his royal Egyptian attire, including a golden necklace and flowing robes, stood confidently at the head of the granary, giving orders to the workers and ensuring that the grain was stored properly for the coming famine. Joseph's leadership was driven by faith and wisdom. Though he had risen from humble beginnings, his rise to power had been ordained by God. He was overseeing the largest and most important task in Egypt, ensuring that the kingdom would survive the 7 years of famine. His brothers, unaware of Joseph's position, were still in Canaan, suffering from the famine. Joseph knew they would eventually come to Egypt for food, but he also wanted to see if they had truly changed. As Joseph walked through the granary, his face showed a calm yet determined expression. His role was not just about managing grain, it was about fulfilling God's plan. The Egyptian workers, who were dressed in fine Egyptian garments, respected him deeply for his wisdom. Joseph remained humble, his thoughts often returning to his family. He knew that despite his high position in Egypt, it was God's plan that had brought him to this point. Joseph continued his leadership with humility, overseeing every detail of the grain storage, ensuring that there would be enough to sustain Egypt and the surrounding nations when the famine arrived. His calm authority and wise counsel were respected by all, and the people of Egypt had faith in his decisions. As the famine grew, Joseph continued his duties as overseer in Egypt, managing the grain storage. Joseph's brothers, unaware of his true identity, arrived in Egypt for food. They came to Joseph, who stood in the position of power, with his royal Egyptian attire, golden necklace, robes, and golden rings, symbolizing his rise to power. The brothers, in their simple Hebrew clothing, tunics and sandals, stood before him. Joseph recognized them immediately, but they did not recognize him. In his heart, Joseph was torn between anger and compassion for his brothers. His thoughts wandered back to the years of betrayal, being thrown into the pit, and his separation from his father. But instead of revealing his identity right away, Joseph decided to test them. He accused them of being spies sent to Egypt to exploit the nation during its time of hardship. His brothers, caught off guard, denied the accusations, pleading for mercy. Reuben, the oldest, stood firm, trying to convince Joseph that they were merely honest men seeking food for their family. Joseph's face showed a mix of suspicion, anger, and calm control, as he sought to determine whether his brothers had truly changed. After Joseph's brothers had left Egypt, carrying the grain they had purchased, Joseph remained in the Egyptian palace, contemplating the next steps. He could have easily forgiven them, but Joseph needed to know if his brothers had truly changed. The betrayal of his youth, being sold into slavery, was still fresh in his heart. As much as he wanted to reveal himself, he knew he had to test their integrity and honesty. Joseph gave specific instructions for the brothers to return with their youngest brother, Benjamin, to prove that they were not spies, as he had accused them. The very thought of Benjamin brought Joseph's memories flooding back. He knew his father, Jacob, would be devastated if anything happened to his youngest son. So the test was not only about trusting his brothers, but also about ensuring Benjamin's safety. Joseph hoped this would be a turning point for his brothers to show whether they had truly changed. The next few days passed, and Joseph spent them overseeing Egypt's grain distribution and making arrangements for the brothers' return. He watched as they made their way back to Canaan, their faces filled with nervousness and guilt. He knew this test was necessary, but part of him wondered if they had truly repented for the wrongs they had done to him. Meanwhile, the brothers, dressed in simple Hebrew tunics and sandals, began the long journey back. Their dark, curly hair and beards marked them as faithful sons of Jacob. As they left Egypt, they carried with them more than just grain. They carried the weight of their past mistakes. The brothers made their way back to Egypt, each step heavier with the weight of the past and the promise they had made to their father. After hours of travel, they reached the borders of Egypt, where their anxiety deepened. The return to Joseph was inevitable, but would they find forgiveness or face punishment? They were not the same men who had sold their brother into slavery, but would Joseph see it that way? Benjamin, the youngest, walked beside them, his heart full of dread. Joseph had not yet revealed himself, and he didn't know what awaited them in the land of Egypt. The brothers, now filled with guilt, began to relive their actions, the memories of their betrayal coming back to haunt them. Joseph, however, had made plans for their return. He arranged for a lavish feast, a moment of tension disguised as a gesture of hospitality. The brothers were confused. Why would a powerful Egyptian ruler choose to dine with them? They had expected judgment, not kindness. As the brothers entered the palace, their eyes widened at the sight of the grand hall and the food spread before them. The room was adorned with Egyptian tapestries, gilded pillars, and golden cups, but it was the presence of Joseph himself that struck them silent. They had no idea that the man before them, wearing royal robes and an imposing crown, was their brother. Joseph watched them from a distance, wondering how they would react to the realization of who he truly was. The stage was set for a momentous revelation, but Joseph held back. He was testing their humility and their willingness to reconcile, not just with him, but with their past. The moment had arrived. Joseph had spent countless days testing his brothers, but his heart could no longer bear the weight of the secret. As the brothers continued to sit at the banquet table, Joseph's emotions overwhelmed him. He had been watching them, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. With the feast behind them and tension still thick in the air, Joseph finally could not stay silent. He ordered the servants to clear the room and make way for the final test. Standing before them, Joseph's voice rang out, filled with emotion. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." The brothers' faces turned pale in shock. How could this be? The mighty Egyptian ruler before them was their long-lost brother. They had not recognized him before. His Egyptian royal attire, including his fine robes and golden jewelry, made him look nothing like the young Joseph they had abandoned years ago. Tears welled up in Joseph's eyes as he saw their stunned faces. He approached them, his heart filled with forgiveness and love. "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves," he said, "because God has sent me here to save lives. What you did was meant for harm, but God used it for good." The brothers, still in disbelief, fell to their knees before Joseph, asking for forgiveness. But Joseph's heart was filled with compassion as he embraced them, forgiving them for the betrayal that had once torn their family apart. They were now reunited, but their journey was far from over. The news of Joseph's survival was about to reach Jacob. Joseph, now fully reunited with his brothers, sent them back to Canaan with gifts and a message. "God has given me a place of honor in Egypt, and I want you to bring our father to live with me here." The brothers, overwhelmed by the turn of events, journeyed back to Canaan. When they arrived, they found Jacob sitting by the tent, his old eyes weary but still filled with strength. As the brothers approached, they could not hold back their excitement. "Father Joseph is alive!" they cried, and Jacob, hearing the news, fell to his knees. For years he had mourned his son, thinking him lost forever. But now his son stood alive, and the joy that filled Jacob's heart was like nothing he had felt before. The brothers told him everything, how Joseph had risen to power in Egypt and how they had been forgiven for their past actions. Jacob, though initially in shock, could hardly contain his joy. He knew God had worked a miracle in bringing his family back together. The family was whole again, and they would soon journey to Egypt to be reunited with Joseph. The journey to Egypt was long, and Jacob felt a mix of emotions. His heart was heavy with excitement and sadness. Excitement because he was about to be reunited with his beloved son Joseph, whom he had thought lost forever. Sadness because he knew this would mark the end of an era. Leaving Canaan meant leaving behind the land that had been promised to his ancestors. The family, including Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Benjamin, and their families, traveled together through the desert. They journeyed for days, the heat of the sun beating down upon them as they moved toward Egypt. As they neared the border of Egypt, Jacob began to prepare himself mentally and spiritually for what awaited them. He knew that God had orchestrated all of this, but the magnitude of what was about to happen still left him in awe. One evening, as they camped under the stars, Jacob gathered his sons around him. "God will be with us," he said, "and we will be reunited with Joseph. He has forgiven us, and now we must trust in God's plan." The next morning, the family continued their journey, each step bringing them closer to the land of Egypt and the reunion they had all been waiting for. Joseph, now fully in charge of Egypt's grain supply, welcomed his father and brothers into the land. He provided them with a place to live in the land of Goshen, where the best of Egypt's land was given to the family. Joseph's heart was full of gratitude as he looked upon his father and brothers, knowing that everything had led to this moment of reunion and provision. Jacob, though advanced in age, was overjoyed to be with his son once again. He settled his family in the fertile land of Goshen, a region rich in resources where they could thrive. The brothers, too, found their place in Egypt, working under Joseph's direction, helping to manage the land and the abundant supply of grain. Joseph made sure that the family was well taken care of. He provided them with food, shelter, and all the resources they needed to prosper. The land of Goshen became a symbol of God's faithfulness to his promises, and Joseph's role as the provider for his family became clear. As the years passed, Jacob grew older, and the family continued to grow. Joseph's brothers had children and grandchildren, and their families flourished in Egypt. Through it all, Joseph continued to be their protector, their provider, and the link between Egypt and his family. Jacob, now very old and frail, gathered his sons around him for his final blessing. He called each of his sons, Reuben, Simeon, Judah, and the others, and spoke words of prophecy over each of them. His blessing was not just about their present, but their future, as he looked ahead to the generations that would follow. Jacob's heart was full of love and wisdom as he spoke to each of his sons individually. Reuben, the firstborn, was reminded of his strength, but also of his past mistakes. Simeon and Levi, who had been reckless, were also given a message of correction. Judah, the fourth son, was chosen to be the leader of the family, and Jacob's words foreshadowed the future greatness that would come from his descendants. When it was Joseph's turn, Jacob looked at him with deep affection and love. He reminded Joseph of the faithfulness of God and the great role Joseph had played in saving their family. Joseph's family would continue to carry God's promise, and Jacob knew that through Joseph's descendants, God's covenant would continue. After Jacob passed away, Joseph continued to lead Egypt with wisdom and compassion. His position as a ruler allowed him to provide for his family, but his heart was always with his people. Joseph knew that his legacy would live on through his descendants and the promises God had made to his father, Jacob. As Joseph grew older, he called his brothers and their children together to speak about the future. He reminded them of God's covenant with their family, a promise that stretched back to Abraham and Isaac. Joseph reassured them that even though they would one day leave Egypt, they would return to the land God had promised them. He made his brothers swear that they would take his bones with them when they left Egypt, for he knew that one day they would return to the land of Canaan. Joseph died in peace, knowing that the family was secure and that God's promises would be fulfilled. His body was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt, awaiting the day when God would call his people back to the land he had promised.